We're all up the tree, in the creek, out to lunch, one brick short, and looking for love. The key is a one of a kind, an iconoclast. The mark of an authentic community for a congregation or community of faith is the presence of a few good characters. I've met some in this congregation. Bless you, I'm glad you're here. In the first congregation I served out of seminary, that community of faith taught me how to be a pastor. Ray was talking a little bit this morning about how he learned how to be a pastor. But I've come to the conclusion that a minister cannot learn how to be a pastor in seminary. Learn lots of things, but how to be a pastor. Erin's shaking her, nodding her head. Ray's nodding his head. Rabbi, are you nodding your head back there? Amen. Thank you. In that first congregation, I was befriended by Dorothy Smith. At first glance, Dorothy was kind of a daunting, odd kind of character. She had this gruff, scratchy, low voice, kind of a drawl. And she drove her car always leaning towards the driver's window. And she always had a big, long cigarette hanging out of her mouth with a stretch of ash about this long. I don't know how she did it. She balanced that. It must have been a gift. The story goes that Dorothy married late in life, but she didn't marry for money. Like a good, proper character, Dorothy married Jack because he was a drunk who could no longer live on his own and take care of himself. So Dorothy took Jack in and lovingly took care of him until his cirrhosis of the liver finally got him in the end. Dorothy loved to play cards, whether it was pinochle at the couples club, or bridge with the proper ladies, or poker down at the local pool hall. I never saw her drink, but Dorothy was supposedly known to have thrown several down in her lifetime. And Dorothy took a shine to this not quite dry behind the ears young preacher. She always was very respectful, but she was also like Nathan of a few weeks back. She let me know when I was far too full of it. And it was the fall of my third year with these good folks, and Dorothy started acting a little strangely. And she started avoiding her regular card games, and she started giving away her treasures. And one day she came by to see me. She had her beautiful handmade, hand-painted nativity scene with figures about this high. And she put the box down in my office at the church, and she said, "Here, you take this. You are the one person I know of who will love it more than I do." And a few weeks later, right after Christmas, we learned that Dorothy had died of lung cancer at her sister's home halfway across the country. Leonard Sweet gives this prophetic admonition to us good and proper people, us church folk. We have tried to live in rather than live out the gospel. It is time for Christians to get out more. Out there in love. Out there in service. Out there in relationships. out there in compassion. The energies of Christianity are outward. The movement of faith is not from the outward to the inward or from the inward to the innermost, but from the inward to the outward. And outward thrust is one of the things that makes Christian faith unique. It was a few days after September 11th, 2001, and I was habituating airports because I was flying all over the country interviewing for conference ministry situations. The airports were almost totally deserted, almost more like mausoleums than hubs of commerce. And I can remember feeling the hurt of the airliners used as weapons against us on the World Trade Center and other targets in our country. And I also remember the vitriolic, hateful, spiteful, ugly calls to suspect everyone, to look at every stranger, every person who looked different from us, like a criminal suspect, to live out of fear. I can recall taking a limo one day to catch a flight out of Chicago O'Hare and feeling this cry building up out of my gut. No, no, I don't choose to live in fear and hatred. That's not my choice for life. I don't choose to exercise revenge against the innocent. And after I got that out of my system, I felt suddenly freed up and a whole lot better. And as I got out of the limo at the curbside outside the terminal building, I saw a fully garbed Muslim mother in a heavy black chador, wrestling two large bags and two energetic toddlers down the concourse unsuccessfully. Well, as a sign of my new faith stance, I went hurrying up to her and said, "Here, let me help you. I'll take the bag and you take the other, and you kids, you just follow along with your mother." And as she did, and they did, and I did, down this long O'Hare concourse, until she got to the gate for Detroit, and I left her there. And I saw nothing but her eyes. But that's really all I had to see. Yep, she was a big inconvenience. All right. A heap full of going out of my way to reach out to someone who was up a tree. But you know, I had tears by the time I got to the end of the concourse. She gave me far more than I could ever return to her. Leonard's tweet ends where I would like this all to end this morning. Listen carefully to his final words of the chapter on Zacchaeus. One of the most fascinating but least explored aspects of Jesus' life for me is his never-failing tender spot for finding room, whether in our rooms or at our tables or in our hearts. Who knows the way his mother's constant telling of the no room at the inn story shaped his soul and psyche. But the no room refrain of Jesus' life is evident everywhere. From his promise, "I go to prepare a place for you," to the sensitivity about Jesus having no place to call his own, to the poignant detail ending the story of the Good Samaritan, finding room in his home for the wounded man. In fact, Jesus had a ready eye for chances to eat and spend the night with village fools and physically disturbed and mentally disturbed people. And he looked for those outcasts wherever they were found. Lepers and tax collectors and prostitutes and sex offenders. For Jesus, it wasn't a sacrifice. It was a passion, even a pleasure. So when you find your community and acknowledge it, when you describe your one another, don't leave out your Zacchaeus. And if you don't have one, go out and find one or two or three. You will find your passion, and you will find your pleasure. It is a great day to be alive. Thanks be to God. Amen.